Trey, thank you very much. Let's bring in the Foreign Desk Editor-in-Chief, Lisa Daftari, and State Department official David Tafuri. Thank you both for being here this evening. David, let me start with you. Prime Minister Netanyahu says this is the definition of democracy in action. He says it is what the majority of the Israeli people want. The thousands on the streets, on the other hand, say this is a direct attack on democracy. Which is it, and should the US, as we just saw Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House, be weighing in on this kind of domestic policy?
First of all, I'm a former State Department official. To answer your question, Netanyahu is wrong. This is a big step backwards for Israel's democracy. One of the things that is important about the health of a democracy is if it has checks and balances. In our system, we have three branches of government with checks and balances between them. In Israel, they really only have two branches that are vying against each other. That's the executive and the judiciary, because the one party rules the executive and the legislative together. So this has rolled back one of the important checks that the judiciary has on the executive. It's also very suspicious because it's happening as Netanyahu is on trial for fraud. And rolling back the power of the judiciary could mean that he could continue as the prime minister even if he's convicted of fraud.
Lisa, David makes some very good points there. There are people who are very concerned that this is a personal project by Netanyahu to go around his own legal issues. But still, it is a domestic policy. Should the United States, the Biden administration, be speaking out so strongly on this?
Absolutely not. This is a domestic issue. It has no bearing on our foreign policy with Israel. The only thing we should care about with regards to Israel is that it is our #1 ally in the Middle East, one of our strongest allies overall. And together we care about the stability, the strength, the prosperity of the Middle East and the region. And that is what President Biden and his administration should be focused on. Take the Abraham Accords further. Focus on Saudi Arabia. This is a domestic issue. And to David's point, this is absolutely not a paragraph. This is a tantrum by the left in Israel over what they do not like. Israel is still a democracy. Their Supreme Court will still have veto power. The only thing this did was take away this clause, which is the clause of reasonableness, which is an arbitrary thing because Israel's a democracy, yet it doesn't have a constitution. So the Supreme Court would look at things in a very arbitrary way, a very subjective way, and say, is that reasonable or is it not? And they found that this was too much of a ping-pong game between the right and the left. So now that the right is in charge, they pass something that the left doesn't like. So they're out on the streets. There are also protests in favor of what happened in Israel. So, you know, they will figure it out. I am confident they will figure it out. It will take compromise, but we have no say in this. This has nothing to do with the Biden administration. And if anything, we are damaging our relationship for the future with Israel.
David, it does strike me as slightly ironic that some here in the United States who are complaining about how political they believe our own Supreme Court has become are now voicing concern about a Supreme Court being criticized and even attacked, in their view, in Israel.
Well, this would be a terrible thing if we did in our system, and we would never do it. And because in Israel, they're taking away the right of the judiciary to invalidate a law, to say a law is improper. And that's one of the fundamental goals and obligations of our U.S. Supreme Court. Where what I find odd about what Lisa said is she said what's important about democracy is that it's stable. But you're showing all of this footage that shows Israel up in arms. The roads in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are being blocked. There are hundreds of thousands of people on the street. Israel is anything but stable right now. I agree. It will survive this. Its democracy will survive this. But the democracy has been degraded. And if if more reforms are put in place to roll back even more the power of the judiciary in November, like some people think is going to happen, it will be degraded even further. And that's problematic for the democracy. Israel's democracy is the best functioning democracy in the Middle East. Let's keep it that way.
Lisa?
You know, David, we saw much more violent protests in France, and we saw even more horrific protests and crackdowns where they were rounding up hundreds of protesters and executing them in Iran. And yet the Biden White House didn't have anything to say about those two countries and didn't
So you're
serve
comparing
any warnings
Israel
over
and
there.
Iran?
I'm
You're
not.
comparing Israel and Iran?
I'm comparing the Biden administration's interference in other countries. While they feel very comfortable to criticize Israel, they did not feel comfortable to criticize Iran's regime, and instead are going after a nuclear deal to give them billions
the Biden
of dollars
administration criticizes
instead.
criticize
David,
Iran all the
very
time,
quickly.
and they have sanctions on Iran.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. It is a debate that will not end here at 11:19 Eastern tonight. It is one that will go on, and it is a very important debate. Lisa Daftari, Foreign Desk Editor-in-Chief, and David Tafuri, former State Department official. David, great to see you as always.